All right, Saturday college football breakdown here in week one. We got a blue blood matchup here. The defending national champ Georgia Bulldogs facing off against the Oregon Ducks. The AP poll might have these teams pretty closely ranked, but the odds makers couldn't disagree more. Seeing Georgia as 17-point favorites, totals at 53, and that seems to be climbing down as well. Just out of full disclosure, this was a best bet for me. I played the under last night on Tuesday at that 53. There's a lot that's been made about Georgia and how many guys they lost off of last year's team. Nakobe Dean, Trayvon Walker. I mean, I could name basically their whole defense from last year. With that being said, the way Georgia has recruited these past 5 years or so, and how Kirby Smart likes to rotate guys along his defense, a lot of these guys stepping into starting roles have plenty of experience. Yeah, they got to prove it on a higher scale, but let's not act like this is going to be some huge downgrade. Am I expecting them to be as historically good as they were a year ago? No, but this is going to be a really good Georgia defense. They're facing off with a very familiar face in Bo Nix. It's funny, he transfers away from the SEC only to have to make his Duck debut against a team that has just haunted him here over the past 3 years or so. Listen, Bo Nix is obviously an electric guy. He's fast. He's evasive from the pass rush. He's certainly a threat with his legs, but he is not an efficient passer. I mean, last year, just a tick above 60%. Just over 7 yards per attempt. Did start taking care of the football a little bit better last year, but if you're an SEC fan, you know who Bo Nix is. He's not a true threat in the vertical passing game. I think that's even more true in this matchup. I think Oregon is extremely talented at that wide receiver position, but they're very inexperienced as well. I think that's a unit. Just this whole passing game, once they get into conference play and once they establish some continuity, should show strides throughout the season, but I'm not going to expect them to step up in this matchup. Oregon is really good up front on their offensive line, and that's going to be true on both sides of the ball. But they do lose Travis Dye at that running back position. Now, Byron Cardwell was electric as a true freshman in more of a secondary role. With that being said, Georgia's really good at outside linebacker. Obviously, they with that loss of Nakobe Dean, still got to fill that void on the inside, but with how good they are on the outside at that second level, I have a hard time seeing Caldwell be able to break off too many big runs and think Georgia's able to bottle him up a little bit and force Nix into some obvious passing downs. There's just not many teams physicality-wise that are going to be able to match up with that. Oregon might be one of them. Mario Cristobal put a ton of stock during his time in Eugene into recruiting the trenches, and that's why you see them being so good up front on the offensive line and just mauling teams. I know they lose Kayvon Thibodeau defensively, but this is going to be a really good front four. Not only that, but Noah Sewell might be the best linebacker in the Pac-12, if not, top 5 linebacker in the country. He's going to be opposite of Justin Flo, who certainly looks the part and is a guy who could have gone anywhere he wanted to. I know they lose one of their corners from a year ago, but other than that, pretty experienced secondary, and they bring in a guy from Colorado to kind of fill that void that they think could be just as good as who they lost. So there aren't many teams that are going to be able to match Georgia's physicality, but I do think Oregon is one of them. A big part of this play on the under is pace. I mean, Georgia was bottom 10 in the country last year in pace, ran less than 64 plays a game. You might say, yeah, well, it's because they were up so much that, they were just sat on it in the second half. That's true. I mean, I could see what would happen in this game, though. Georgia's never been a team that likes to really push the pace. Probably going to try to establish a ground game. I mean, why would Georgia try to extend this game any further? I know Georgia lost some at running back. I don't think though we're going to see a huge drop off throughout the course of the year, but this is just a tough Oregon defense to run on with Sewell, with Flo, and with that physical front. It's not that they won't be able to get 3 or 4 yards, but they're not going to be able to break off a ton of big runs either. I've sung Stetson Bennett's praises over this whole offseason. I've heard this narrative that, Stetson Bennett, if he was playing at Missouri, he'd just be this average player. That might be true, but I can only judge Stetson Bennett on where he's at. I mean, he was over 10 yards per attempt last year. He's very underrated with his feet. He is an extremely underrated player still. I mean, if you're over 10 yards per attempt, I don't care what team you're playing on. That is extremely, extremely efficient. So I do view Bennett as a threat. With that being said, Georgia's not going to be a team that chucks the ball around the yard. They do have clear-cut the best tight end room in college football. Nobody's debating that, but do lose a lot of wide receiver production off of last year's team, led by George Pickens, obviously. So listen, I do think Georgia wins this game pretty handily, but I do think it comes in lower scoring fashion. The reality of it is Bo Nix is virtually zero threat to dice this Georgia defense up through the air. So yeah, they might be able to get to the 50, but I just don't see them being able to finish drives through the air. I mean, from there, Georgia's going to be able to play this game at their pace. I don't think that. I think people are going to be surprised at how much pushback they get from Oregon's defense. I'm thinking somewhat of a 27-10, 31-13 type of game. Seeing this total above 52, thought that was a pretty clear-cut decision to play this under. It's a multi-unit play for me. I plan on having my entire week 1 card out by Thursday. So if you do want to be certain what I am on officially, follow me on Twitter at Fordham Betting. I actually released 4 best bets on Tuesday night. 3 of those being multi-unit plays. So I will leave the link to those write-ups in the description. We started off this college football season with a 1-0 week 0. We had Illinois minus the 10.5. That was a 1.5 unit winner. Last year in college football, hit at a 55% clip, netted over 27 units. Feel even better about how I'm going to do this year. You can also see all the other week 1 game breakdowns. If you go to playlists here on the channel, it'll say week 1 previews and predictions. Click that. I'll have all of the other video breakdowns that I'm going to do in that playlist. And one of my 3 multi-unit plays here for week 1 is going to be here on the under 53.